And sometimes we wish we didn't take that decision. However, once we decided, the result and effect is continuing even though we don't like or we are excited. When a simple decision, what to prepare for meal. Cynthia yesterday prepared meatloaf, and also she baked a zucchini bread, and both as very enjoyable and strengthening. And also she made a salad, which is very good. My wife liked that very much. I cannot eat it. So I have to take one more piece of meatloaf to fill the gap. So decisions are inevitable in our life. It is simple to the profound one, temporary to the long-term one. However, how do we make that decision? Do we make that decision with the common sense, or following the pattern from the society, from the neighborhood, from the peers, or do we depend in the Word and from God? That is very important. Adam and Eve were given the instruction to decide their daily life, especially their meals. They were given the freedom to eat from all the trees, all the food, anytime they want, except from the tree of life and death in the middle of the garden. And that information and the insight came to them from the Almighty God, who has created them in His image. And later, another person came in and said, "Hello, I used to live here, but the landlord and myself had some disagreement. I thought I'll live here, I will make my office up with him. And he didn't like that, so he sent me away. But now, during my walk, I found, and I knew people are living and also kept nice. So I came to say hello to you. But by the way, you can eat all that." He said, no, there's one tree I cannot eat. Not only that, I cannot eat, I should not even touch that tree. And then he said, "You will not die." So a new information. Now, it came from the serpent. You will not die. Also you will know good and evil. And you will become like God. That information was appealing. There's one simple information from God says, you should not eat from the tree of life and death, from the middle in the garden. You can eat from all of them. Even you can eat the tree of life, which is going to be everlasting. But the new insight came from serpent, and Eve were unable to understand the deception behind that idea. So as soon as she heard, wow, this is good, I can become like God, and also it is going to provide me life without any hindrance. But so she looked at that fruit with that insight. She found the tree was good for food, and she found it is pleasant to the eyes, and also she desired to make one wise. So the new information. The one information is a simple one: don't eat. That's nothing more. Said you will die. The other one gives you added insight, but the problem is this is from a source who has no relationship to Adam and Eve. The only intention of this source is to destroy their life everlasting in them and their relationship to God Almighty under His leadership, to take away from Him. And she fell into that trap. Now you know the rest of the story. And so decision is very significant, and we are bound by the result that we are totally unable to change once it happened. Not only that, by this time they were very friendly with God. They were always looking for His visit in the evening, and they are very eager to see Him. But after they ate the fruit, their mind has changed. Their understanding has a new thing. They began to fear. They want to hide. They want to buy the best apron. Before, they were covered with the glory of God. Therefore, they were never thought about wearing an apron. Now they found they are in need of one. And God finally provided them with an animal skin. So, especially the fear. The fear caused by disobedience cannot move away from person unless you reconcile. Even after reconciliation, even after continuous blessing to your life, that fear is hidden deep in your mind. When we look in the life of Joseph, the brothers did not like him. They hated him. They could not speak with him peaceably. They hated him more because he had more revelation from God. And he was walking with God, and he received the plan of God for his life, and he revealed that they hated him more, and hated him more for his dream, conspired against him, threw him for wild animals, sold Joseph finally for 20 silver. They were winning, they were successful, and finally they took the garment given to him by his father and said, "Look, make sure this belongs to your son." And we found it. And father said, "Oh, a wild animal killed my son, ate him." And he was crying and weeping and sad for nearly 15 years of his life. So the decision has affected their father. They were totally unable to help him to remove the deep sorrow in his mind. Even though they were helping him, they were caring for the sheep, and they went to Egypt to bring food, but they were only able to increase that sorrow by their service. But, but finally Joseph said, "I am Joseph, your brother. Don't be unhappy. God has sent me here before you so that I will be able to provide food and blessing to your life. So you please bring my father." So he comforted them, even though they were surprised and shocked. They don't know, because they were thinking this is a person who is in extreme power, who only can provide, and they were always saying, bowing down and worshipping. It's a dream, and the Lord gave it to them. They refused to believe. Now they are exorcising without realizing who he is. And when he finally said, "I am Joseph," they cannot believe. So they went back and Jacob came and Jacob blessed King Pharaoh. They were given the best land. They were given the food and the provision and the cultivation, all the opportunity so that they can grow in prosperity. And they became very prosperous people. But Jacob died. Now, they knew very clearly this is Joseph, our younger brother. And he is in power, but he is not doing any harm to us. He has a mind that can forget things in such a way, he never seeks revenge. The woman who deceived him and threw him in the prison, he never thought about her. He never looked for her. So he has a mind God has given to forgive for good. So Joseph forgave his brothers. After they have confessed what they have done, they thought their conversation, Joseph never understood. They were talking loudly one another, realizing who Joseph is and what is his knowledge. He understood every word and every body language of his brothers because he knew them very well. And when after the death, the funeral was over, everything was over, a fear came to them back. Now our father has gone. This is a time Joseph is going to act. And they said, we are your servant. The people who refused to accept revelation from God, now, without any hesitation, respecting him and honoring him, says, we are your servant. Please don't do any harm to us. You know, they fell down before Joseph. Before they fell down, not knowing who was Joseph, now they fell down before Joseph, fully knowing he is our younger brother. Why? Because they are still afraid. The fear of their decision to hate and kill and sell Joseph has not gone away even after Joseph has forgiven them. Joseph has blessed them. So we have to be very careful how we make a decision. Our God has given us insight to make decisions on every issue. We are mainly motivated by our culture, our tradition, our new generation's concepts. We value things in the light of how others are thinking about us. Very seldom we value what God is going to think about. But if you make a decision in the light of what is the plan of God, what is the desire of God to our life, then the result will not only blessing to us for the temporary time, but also is a blessing to us, to the generation. Coming down to the generation, Abraham decided to leave his land of opportunity. He was a successful businessman, wealthy person, living in the midst of families and relatives and friends and business partners. But when the glorious God appeared to him, he come to know that he has to obey. He received an insight. He received an instruction. Go to the land where I am going to show you. Did not say the name of the land. Only said, to the land I am going to show you. That is the promised land. But he saw the glorious God and he began to see this is very significant, very important. Therefore, he left his land where he was born and grew all these years, not knowing where exactly going, but he walked and finally came to a land where he actually didn't possess except a cemetery. That's all he had. But still he looked cities built by God, and he saw in faith the cities God built. And so even today, his children are significant in the whole world. And there is no government in the world today can ignore them. So that family, that God's man of God and his generations, which became the nation called Israel, is still very important group of people. And people in the history tried to destroy them, eliminate them, but they were not successful. Because Abraham took a decision based on God's vision and God's plan for his life to make a nation for the glory of God, to reveal himself to the whole world. God made Adam, God worked with Noah, and the people were not able to understand. So finally God said, I'm going to make a nation so that I will be known to the whole world. But the national people of Abraham sometimes forget who they are. See that two men in the portion we read today talking about Boaz. And something about that Boaz is interesting to observe. It says, and Naomi had a kinsman of her husband's, a mighty man of wealth of the family. This man has been introduced as a mighty man of wealth, not as a person who obeyed God or devoted to God or anything that will classify him as a spiritual person. Rather, he was introduced as a mighty, wealthy person. But you have to understand that in comparison of the time and people of that time, the time is a time of famine. In that midst of famine, he never became poor. Rather, he became a wealthy man. No, rather, he became a mighty wealthy man. But a man in that generation, in the same town, lived through the famine, also made a decision. Boaz decided to stay in Bethlehem. Elimelech decided in chapter 1 to leave Bethlehem. The time Elimelech took that decision to leave Bethlehem, and Boaz took the decision to stay in Bethlehem, in the eyes of the people, who is the smart person? Definitely Elimelech, because he saw the tragedy of the famine. And therefore, he decided to move to Moab to do the farming. You know, during the potato famine, Irish people came to the United States. Now they are doing very well today. So, he went to Moab. But he forgot something. He forgot something. That is, this is a land God has given to them to be there so that they can manifest the glory of God to the whole world. They cannot do that apart from this land because this is a territory God has given to them so that they can stay in that land and enjoy the fertile harvest of that land, milk and honey. Also, they have a tabernacle and they have to be in the presence of God 3 times a year. They have to do the offering and sacrifices. They have to live in colony. But in the midst of them, the tabernacle was there so that God's revelation to those people come from there. It does not mean, God is a God of one territory, because even in the Old Testament, His presence of everywhere is very clearly taught. He is not sitting in one place like God who lives in, the God of created gods. I create a God from a piece of wood, and the other piece of the same wood I will use for my firewood. He is not that kind of God. He is a God who created me. He is the creator. He was the one who gave us the form and given us the confidence, do not fear, because He has redeemed us. He has called us. He made us His own. So this God, at that time, by His wisdom, chose to reveal Himself to the whole world through this nation. In order to do that, they have to be there. They cannot offer sacrifice. They cannot celebrate festivals. They cannot give tithe to anywhere. They have to do everything right here. But Elimelech only thought, what is the next solution, practical solution, so that I can overcome the famine? Instead of asking a question, I am living in a time of judges. When judges were ruling the nation, who was the king? God Himself was the king. When people rejected Samuel's children and told, we wanted a king, Samuel felt very sad. Why these people are rejecting me? I am praying for them. I am working hard for them. I am doing a good judgment for them. And God said, Samuel, don't worry. They are not rejecting you. They are rejecting me. They don't want me to be. Instead of thinking, why? When He is in sovereign control of my life, my family, my nation, why the famine? If they thought in that way, they would understand God is disciplining them to restore them back to God. And the book of Judges have full stories how God has disciplined them so that they will turn back to God. And they turned back all the time. But this man was not thinking what is the plan of God for his life. He only thought in terms of human wisdom. If the harvest is poor, job is not available, schools are not up to the level, let us move from here. But Boaz said, no, this is a land God has given to me, and this is a property God has given to me, and this is a place God has called me to serve Him. Therefore, I cannot ignore the Levitical system, or the tabernacle, or the worship, or the offering, or the festival. Therefore, even though I am hungry, I am going to stay here. My God is here. So he made that decision to stay in the land. You know, to the surprise, the man who was smart is no longer there. It is a 10-year period. At the end of the 10 year, Elimelech died, Mahlon died, Chilion died, Naomi, Ruth, and Orpha left without food, without house, without cultivation. But Naomi had some tiny bit of thought about God. So she turned around and looked to her nation and came to know God has visited his people and provided food. Immediately she said, I am going back. But meantime, the 10 year of time of famine, the man who sought the God and sought to delight the God, and the man who was happy to see what God is doing in his life, even though it is famine and difficulties due to famine, he depended on God. He said, God is disciplining me. I need to turn back to him. And we don't have all those details here, but I'm sure he turned back. As a result of that, in the midst of that famine, God has prospered him, and in 10 years of time, by the time God visited this nation and provided the food, this man became a mighty wealthy man. Not just a wealthy man, a mighty wealthy man. Not only that, Boaz not only became a mighty wealthy man, but also Boaz made every simple decisions only in the light of the word of God. And when he came to his, as we read down in verse 4, we read, and behold, Boaz came from Bethlehem and said unto the helpers, that the Lord be with you. And they answered him, the Lord bless thee. So, here is a man who come to his field where his people are working for him. He was not looking how they were performing their duty. That was not a major concern for him. Rather, he wanted to bless them. To be successful business person, you have to be observing all the time how you can bring more production, more output from lesser people and less expense. A conveyor system, if you introduce to the production unit, it moves on a steady speed, will force you to work with that speed so that 10 people working, if there is a 10 people working in a paint booth, with a conveyor system, you can eliminate 4 painters into 2, no helpers, 1 helper to hang and 1 helper to take out. Before that, you need 3 painters and 3 helpers, 2 shifts. Now everything is changed. Simply introduce the conveyor system. But there are 2 factors. One, the working person has no choice to go on his speed. He has to go on the speed of that belt, which means he has no time to breathe. Like that. If you stop it, this will go away without painting. So you cannot. If you turn it off, supervisor come and ask, why you turn it off? But Boaz is a different person. He is not thinking anything in that terms. Rather, he was thinking what God wanted him to do. God wanted his people to bless his people. And in the Mosaic book, we read that you should be a blessing people. And that is, he obeyed that. As a result of that, he blessed his people, and his people also blessed him. So they also got an opportunity to stretch themselves. They are kneeling, bending down and harvesting. Now they can stand strong and say, thank you, good to see you, God bless you. So they got a little gap. And then they can restart again the work. After only that, this man looked into his field. When he looked into the field, he saw a new person, because he knew all the people who are working for him. But he is a new person. Who is that person? Then he came to know that is Ruth. That name brought him a reality. Here is a woman who respects God, who honors God, and her respect and honor and dependence on God is manifested by leaving herself from her land, her parents, her culture, her God, and came to an unknown people only to help her mother-in-law and to seek the face of God and his people. He was excited, even though she is a Moabitess. He was excited because of her commitment to God Almighty and her willingness to help her mother-in-law, not her mother. I don't know much about this country and the daughters-in-law and mother-in-law. But I know because I lived with my grandmother and my mother. I lived with my mother and my wife. I'm now living with my wife and my daughters-in-law. I can tell you, in generally, it is like a cobra and mongoose. But at the very same time, by the grace of the Lord, with my mother and my wife, with my wife and my daughters-in-law, the cobra and mongoose keep a distance. Here is a woman who had all the opportunity not to come with her mother-in-law, but she came with her mother-in-law and said, I am going to come with you. Why? Because God is there. His people are there. And you are there. So I am going to come. And then Boaz knew all these things because of their arrival the previous day. And Boaz said, you are a wonderful woman, and you have come to the trust. You trusted yourself in God. When she came, there was no harvest in her field because nobody cultivated that. It's lost. In a sense, they lost that field. So she came to poverty. She came to no house. She came to no job because her Hebrew is something like my English and very difficult. And I have found even, I'm here since 1972. Even this time also I found many times I say something, they have to ask, what did you say? It's not that they do not know English. It's because my pronunciation is such, they are not able to catch everything I am saying. So, can you imagine in 1973 when I started seminary in Portland, Oregon, it took 2 years for me to understand they are teaching English. And one professor told me, if you're going to write English like this, you never can minister in this country. Because he corrected every spellings and my paper is full of red ink. So that is how Ruth also. But she was not concerned about that. She was only thinking, your God is my God, your people are my people, and your house is my house, and your graveyard is also mine. So until you die and I die, there is no separation. So that is the commitment. That is the commitment not simply to her mother-in-law only. That's actually a result of her commitment to the God who is enthroned in heaven. And this Boaz liked that character. And he said, you are hired. You can glean for the whole harvest season of barley and wheat in this field. There's no need for you to go to any other place. And don't get insulted and hurt. And my men will not do that to you. Rather, I'm going to tell them to give you some more to collect. So at the end of that day, she was able to collect an ephah of barley. The generous, God-fearing, God-honoring Boaz gave only 6 measures of barley. But her work, God provided through Boaz, one ephah. So he was a generous man. Not only that, he said, you can drink the water that is meant for my workers, but you can drink that. You can eat food from here. So he hired for her to do gleaning. Food was provided, protection was provided, water was provided, and also said, God in heaven is going to reward you because you are dependent on Him and you trusted Him. So look, what was he thinking? He was not, why the other people of that generation refused to go obey the God of Israel, who has made to that people the provision to have the gleaning for the poor. It is the provision God has given through Moses to that people to glean from the field. And everybody refused to do that. But this man has no problem because he valued the God's instruction more than his own wisdom. In chapter 3, this mother, Naomi, is a woman who always seeking the best for her daughters-in-law. Don't come with me because the men in my country never marry you. Don't come with me. You have to go back to your mother and your father and get married and have children. So she is seeking best for her daughters-in-law. But Ruth refused because he wanted to be with her. And now again, Naomi is thinking about getting married. And finally, she found Boaz is the man who owned the field where Ruth was able to glean. And then he's our redeemer. So I'm going to arrange a marriage for you. You don't have to date him. I will arrange that. And she said, okay, now time has come. Winnowing is going to take place. Therefore, I want you to go in the field and wait for the opportunity and ask him to spread on you the blanket. Which means, not Boaz was asking, Ruth was asking that. And in chapter 3, we read in verse 9, and he said, who art thou? And she answered, I am Ruth, thine handmaid. Spread, therefore, thy skirt over thine handmaid, for thou art a near kinsman. And what did he say? And he said, blessed be thou of the Lord, my daughter, for thou hast showed more kindness in the latter end than at the beginning, inasmuch as thou followed not young men, whether poor or rich. So this is very clear. Boaz is an older person. I don't know how many years old, I don't know that, but he recognized here is a young, beautiful girl, can easily find a husband from wealthy or poor young people, but she only looked what her mother-in-law's suggestion. In other words, she was looking only to the Lord. And he found that is a wonderful thing. But also he said, now fear not, I will do thee all that is requirest for all the city of the people doth know that thou art a virtuous woman. Now he is saying, you are not only fearful of God, you are also a virtuous woman. And he said, I will do everything. But there's one problem, you are beautiful, you are young, you asked me to marry you, the law of Moses permit that marriage, and your mother-in-law likes that marriage, so there are 5 good reasons I can marry you. No. There is one reason he cannot marry. That is the reason of God. And says in verse 12, and now it is true that I am thy near kinsman, howbeit there is a kinsman nearer than I. That is not a plan by any people. It is by default. It is by the plan of God, there is another man who qualifies to marry this girl, even though she has all the quality he likes and he has all the opportunity provided there, and the blessing is there, community is ready to accept him, law is ready to accept him, but God is not ready to accept him. So he saw that. Look at that. This man is thinking, what is God thinking? And God has placed another man before him. So he is standing ahead of him in the line. And he said, I can help you, but I cannot marry you. So his decision of helping her is because he is a virtuous woman. But his decision not to marry her because that is the plan of God. But however, later the man who stood in the front said, I cannot marry because I don't want to give my name to the family of Elimelech, to Mahlon. I don't want my children to be known as children of Mahlon. Therefore, I cannot do that. Then he married her because now next person, he is qualified. So when God has given him the permission, then only he married her. That permission is not his own creative ideas. It is a clear permission from the community as God has revealed it to them. It is not a trick. It is not a scheme. It is not an intellectual approach. It is a pure obedience to God. When he married, God has blessed that family. And this Ruth became more loving to her mother-in-law. And her love has been measured as 7 times better than your own sons. And so the marriage, God blessed that marriage, improving the character of Ruth to serve her mother-in-law much better than she wanted. And the community, the neighboring women, began to find this daughter-in-law is such a woman, loves her mother-in-law. And they began to observe her love and said, your daughter-in-law loves you better than your own 7 children. She didn't have 7 children. So I say, in other words, her love is so great, so wonderful, because this love came from God himself. God gave her love. God gave his love to her heart. So she is manifesting that love. And then the Lord blessed that family with Obed. And God blessed him with Jesse. And God blessed him with David. Look at that. Look at that. A man who sought the face of God to make a decision is receiving blessing from God generation after generation. God has placed this shepherd boy. And also, he was a forgotten boy. When Prophet Samuel came to make a king from the home of Jesse, all children were there, standing in the line to become a king, but David was not there. But that is the person God has raised from the shepherd, from the pastor, to the throne of King of Israel. God didn't stop that there. God didn't stop that there. He continued that blessing from the root of Jesse, from the family of David, to sit on the throne of David. Jesus was born, and he is going to be a king on this earth. On that throne, we all see him, we all be with him, and Boaz and Ruth and Naomi will see that. Will see that. Look how eternal the blessing is. And in him, only in him, we will be having hope of salvation. No one can help us. Only God can help us. So he gave his son because he loves us. By believing in Lord Jesus Christ, every person will be saved. This is the message my wife and I wanted to carry to the people in Southeast Asia. And God has blessed us to do that from 1979 through this day. So please remember us in your prayer. Thank you so much for this unique opportunity to meet you all today and share from the Word, to encourage as we make the decision. Let the plan of God come into that decision. So glory will go to Him, and we will be blessed not only today, not only tomorrow, not only next generation, but to the eternity. Thank you very much. God bless you all.